constantly bubble just below the surface of a world built by human hands. We honor complexity at the same time we keep things understandable. Do join me. We'll have a lot of fun together.
Weekdays at 5:45 on KSJE. KSJE is supported by San Juan Regional Medical Center, which is officially baby-friendly. This evidence-based initiative is designed to support mother-baby bonding and optimal infant feeding practices by upholding the 10 steps to successful breastfeeding. San Juan Regional Medical Center, officially baby-friendly, and serving the Four Corners since 1910. Find out more online at sanjuanregional.com. Ten minutes past 8 o'clock. It's Thursday morning, February 13th. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Micklin. Thank you for tuning in to KSJE 90.9 FM over the air here in San Juan County, 103.3 FM over the air in Durango, Colorado, and of course streaming audio everywhere from our website, ksje.com. A special good morning also to our viewers who are watching this visual radio program on the KSJE YouTube channel and Facebook page. We're glad you're with us, everybody. Welcome aboard. This morning, our topic is economic development. My guest in the studio, Arvin Trujillo, is here. He is the CEO of Four Corners Economic Development. So we hope you'll stay tuned for that important conversation coming up in the next few moments right here on KSJE. Later on this hour, I'll be talking with Wally D of Wally D Sports. She's going to bring us our weekly prep sports update. We're keeping tabs on some of the girls' basketball teams who are doing pretty well in the region. So we'll talk more about that later on at 8:50 a.m. on KSJE this morning. Mick Hess will be here at 9, Roving with the Arts. After the news, our classical music program, of course, and Mick is playing some Bach harpsichord toccatas for us this morning on the program. So make sure you stay tuned for that coming up next hour right here on KSJE. In addition to Facebook and YouTube, of course, you can also follow KSJE on Twitter. We share news stories and breaking news alerts at KSJE_news, station information at KSJE, and also connect with us on Instagram as well. Our weather forecast, it's going to be sunny for the next several days. In fact, it looks like a pretty decent weekend. Today, sunshine with a high of 46 in Farmington, clear and 20 overnight, a bit warmer tomorrow with a high of 51 on Friday, 53 and sunshine on Saturday, and near 60 degrees on Sunday with overnight lows in the 20s and 30s, and then maybe the next storm system popping in briefly on Monday with a chance of a flurry or rain shower, high 51, and the next chance of rain maybe next Wednesday. We'll see if that happens. We always tell you, of course, that visual radio can take you places. Here's a great shot I found this morning up in Idaho, the Teton Valley, of the sunrise coming up, and that is in the Teton Valley of Idaho, where it's currently 17 degrees, a mostly cloudy day, as you can see. They're on their way, though, to a high of 29 after an overnight low of 14 degrees in Idaho as the sun rises there. Well, let me turn to my guest who is here with me this morning to talk about economic development, Arvin Trujillo. Good morning.
Good morning, Scott.
Welcome back. Good to have you
here. Good to be here.
You bet. There's a lot of things that are going on, so we want to catch up with you. I guess let's start maybe with the forum that we were talking about the last time you were here in January. It had just taken place that week, and so I think everyone is calling it a good success, and not just because I was involved with it, but but because you were involved with it and your staff. But the idea was to get folks from all the communities together and talk a little bit about what's being done for economic development here in San Juan County, right?
Yes, it turned out to be a real good forum. It was the first one that we've held in partnership with Wells Fargo.
That's right.
And, we had an opportunity to bring a national expert in, Sarah House. She was able to explain what she saw as some of the pending trends and outlook for 2020, which really, in a lot of aspects, were very positive, looking at the economy. She continued to warn everybody that people keep talking about a recession, but she kept saying, that could become a self-prophecy if we keep talking about it.
Right, that's true.
Keep saying that it's going to come.
Right.
It could, but she was saying, looking at 2020 at this point, and probably into the first part of 21, things are looking very stable. There are some indicators there. There's some areas that we are watching, such as the trade wars.
Right.
We're watching how industry is going to react to that. We're also looking at the election and how that pans out.
That could have an impact on financial markets,
Yeah.
I would think, being the non-economist that I am. But even I can see that perhaps having an impact one way or the other.
Exactly.
Sure. And of course, I imagine, and this happened pre this coronavirus stuff that we're hearing about.
Yes.
And so that can have an impact on the global economy and Chinese economy, which is a big one. So
Right.
if they catch a cold, everybody sneezes or something like that.
Well, and she gave a fairly good explanation and an outlook as to what we're going to be, or what they are looking at in 2020. And again, having Dr. Peach from New Mexico State and Rachel Moskowitz from Workforce Solutions, bringing that down to the state and down to the regional level, looking at San Juan County. Both economists there were very optimistic as to what we could possibly look at here, both in the state and the region. They were very upbeat about the aspects of oil and gas and some of the prospects that could bring. We're, as you are well aware, looking at a petrochemical operation and seeing if we can bring that into the region here. There seems to be some real benefits, and again, everything's looking positive at that point. One thing that really came out, and we're going to have Rachel back in March to talk to us, but one of the things she was talking about was really making sure, just as there is a huge push on Census 2020, she wants to also push the economic aspects and the community development data gathering that the state does, so that we get a better picture as to what's happening here in the state, and more importantly here in San Juan County. Because one thing that she mentioned to us was that because of the diverse aspects of the county, part of being uncorporated and being municipalities, but really the majority of it being on the Navajo Nation.
Right.
We need to make sure that all that data is collected. They do things by visiting homes and businesses, and they send surveys out. And so we're going to get more information about that and see how can we make sure that this information is being returned to the state, so we get a better picture of what's happening here in San Juan County.
So the census that you're talking about, right? That's
Yeah.
coming up. I know April is kind of the big push, and we'll be hearing more about it as we get closer to the month of April. But that has economic development implications
Yes.
as well.
Yes, it does. And again, we missed out. They were looking at, I believe, an undercount of anywhere from 1% to 3%. Which translates into tens of millions of dollars in federal aid and federal assistance that would be possible here in the county, just the
Got it.
county. And so again, there are implications on making sure that we get as accurate a count as possible, and coupled with that, we're wanting to make sure that our economic data is also sound and as accurate as possible, because that will help drive a lot of decisions that we're looking at here in the county and in this part of the state.
Right. And for me, again, just as an outsider looking in, I remember, I think, when the county hit the threshold of 100,000, and that triggered a whole bunch of things that happened because we became an MSA, a Metropolitan Statistical Area.
Yes.
I think a lot of some of these national chains started looking at the area with a different
Exactly.
set of glasses, basically, to say, oh, there's a good population base there that we might be able to move into that area and provide our goods and services, or whatever the case may be. And so it's that type of data that I think you're talking about, right, that could attract maybe manufacturers or others if we reach a certain threshold of a number of people who just happen to live in our county, in our area.
Yes, and that's where we are looking at educating. That's why I'm looking at this type of information being shared with our communities and our civic groups and et cetera, because the better we understand how this data is utilized, the better we can provide the necessary information when we get these surveys, when we get these visits, when we get these phone calls. Because I'm just like everybody else. You get these things and they want to do a survey. You either look at it and you throw it to the side, or you say, well, I'm a little too busy, I can't do that. But really looking at it from the aspect of, as we provide this information, we're able to show people exactly what to expect here in the county, and especially with the different municipalities here in the county.
Right.
Because people don't understand the wide reach that this area has as far as its economic tentacles are concerned, in terms of how we support and how the rest of the region supports this particular area here. So
Right. Well,
the better we can do that description, the better off we are.
True. And you've talked to us before about your efforts in multiple states, in all of the Four Corners
Yes.
states, about banding together. And, we have 140,000 folks here in San Juan County. You've
Right.
got folks in La Plata County. You've got folks in Montezuma, maybe San Juan County, Utah, Apache North County in Arizona. And by putting all those numbers, accurate numbers together, then you get a pretty major looking market for folks to take a look at. And that's also what you're talking about.
That's exactly what we're talking about. And the better we can describe ourselves and paint our picture, the better off we are as we begin to look at those alternatives coming down the pike, as we see the transitioning happening within the energy sector. And so again, those are some of the things that we're really focused on right now, to see how do we best do that? How do we educate ourselves in
Right.
understanding this information? And then how do we help those individuals or those organizations within the state, or even on a regional basis with the other states, collect this information so that we're able to compile and really utilize this for the benefit of the Four Corners region.
Good to know. Arvin Trujillo is my guest this morning. He is the CEO of Four Corners Economic Development. You mentioned this petrochemical plant, Arvin Trujillo, and we've talked about that before, because that could use maybe some of the byproducts of our natural gas industry and things like that. That's the reason for this type of industry to be maybe courted to maybe come here or develop their industry here. Isn't that part of this?
That's a part of this. And again, the idea here is, for decades, we've been an exporter of natural resources, where other areas have then utilized our natural gas, our oil, our coal, in order to produce value-added product that they would then sell within their particular areas. And in some cases, we end up buying it back
Right.
here. But what I'm looking at is utilizing these natural resources. Can we now make that into value-added product that will assist us here in this particular region? So this petrochemical initiative is really looking at natural gas, and how can we begin to look at value-added product coming out of natural gas, and being able to enhance our capabilities to bring new industry here into the area. And on that point, we are getting ready right now to have a signing ceremony for a memorandum of understanding between San Juan County and the Navajo Nation, to actually have an agreement there to say that in partnership, San Juan County and the nation will work towards looking and assessing and bringing a petrochemical, some type of industry within the petrochemical area here in the Four Corners area, but more importantly, also look at bringing a railroad here into the region.
That railroad project that we've talked
Yes.
about too. And so this is important, I would think, to get the Navajo Nation on board to sign this agreement with the county. And basically it just says that the two entities will work together in these efforts, right, for these two
That's
different
correct.
things, the rail and the petrochemical. And they're not necessarily tied to each other. One could feasibly happen without the other, I suppose.
They could, but
it'd be nice to do them
It'd
together.
be nice to do them together, because you have that basically that scale of volume or scale of sales there, in that the petrochemical plant could help support the development of the railroad, and you would have the railroad there that would be able to ship value-added product out of the area. And so again, we're looking at how to really find a process by which we can bring both together at the same time, so that they basically benefit one another. Because in the past, and we spoke about this before, one of the big stumbling blocks in bringing rail to the area has been that $250 million price tag
Yes.
to bring that infrastructure in. Well, if you look at a petrochemical industry coming in, you're talking in the range of anywhere between $4 to $6 billion worth of investment.
That's billion with a B.
That's billion with a B. And so you look at the scale of those two projects,
Right.
$6 billion versus $250 million. It makes sense then, if you are going to bring petrochemical industry here, why not bring the railroad also?
Sure.
You know, and how do you begin to partner those aspects?
Well, and again, down to the economics of it too, right? Because then if you have a rail, that makes their exports a lot cheaper than having to fill up a bunch of tanker trucks and send them out on the highways, I suppose.
Well, that seems to be intuitive,
right,
on that. But again, that's what this MOU is going to be all about, is looking at these factors, really defining what is it we would like to have. How do we structure this? Where do we need to go in terms of making sure negotiations are done? What benefits would come to the Navajo Nation? What benefits could be realized as far as the county is concerned? And by working those two pieces together and looking at this infrastructure, how would it benefit the Four Corners region as a whole?
Right.
And so again, it's been building on that basic concept that Four Corners Economic Development has been working on partnerships here in the Four Corners area.
That's true. And when we're talking about rail as well, I know some of the important stuff too is to figure out, well, what are you going to bring in on the rail because you want to fill those train cars with something?
Yes.
And more importantly, what are you going to send out because you can't send it back empty because that won't work. That won't be profitable. And so the idea, I guess, too, is if you're bringing in all this stuff for consumers and cars and stone and building products, and then you load it up, and then when you're sending out maybe these petrochemical value-added products and other things that you can ship back down the rail line.
Well, looking at the Navajo Nation, you got NAPI.
Sure.
They can see benefit from that. You've got
I mean, they already have a bunch of trucks that they have to use, but this could be an option for them.
You've got Raytheon.
Right.
Again, looking at that aspect and what they can do there. In terms of construction and looking at the overall development, you got NECA, the Navajo Engineering and Construction Authority. They could be a part of this and see some real benefit. At the end of the day, we're looking to site these on the Navajo Reservation. You're looking at jobs and job creation again.
Sure.
Because as we begin to look at the closure of plants, you know, APS just announced that they're looking to go coal-free,
carbon-free, right?
Carbon-free by 2050. And they're looking probably at shutting down Four Corners in the 2031 timeframe.
Right.
So again, we're looking at those aspects and seeing what's the alternative? Where do we go from here? What's our plan B? Mm-hmm. And so that's what we're looking at. And we're partnering with the nation to begin to really look at this aspect. And at first it was kind of a pipe dream out there.
Right.
Can we do this? But now we've got the entities coming together to actually sign a memorandum of understanding that says, we're going to look at this. We're going to take a look at this and see what we can develop and what makes sense for this area.
Sure.
What makes sense for the different parties in play here. And can we make this work? And how do we make this work?
Right.
And so those are things that we're really excited about coming down the pike.
Well, I know you've probably heard it, and I've heard it too from folks who are saying they've been talking about bringing rail to the Four Corners for 50 years, if not longer. And so what makes this different? But I think maybe some of the things that do make it different are maybe some of these other economic pressures that you're talking about, the changes with the power plants and some of these other things that are going on. It paints a really different picture than it did 50 years ago.
It does. And again, that's where we're looking at how do we begin to utilize that aspect. People are seeing a lot of good opportunities, and in that same aspect, we're beginning to grow in different areas that we weren't growing at 50 years ago,
Sure.
or even 20 years ago.
Right.
Looking at Napping, where it is now, looking at Raytheon, looking at places like Rocky Mountain Chocolates, looking at what Pesco's doing and what we have the capabilities of doing as far as small manufacturing is concerned. There's just a number of areas that we were not exploring a few years ago that we are doing now, and having this type of infrastructure in place will help enhance our ability to reach those markets, not only here in the southwestern portion of the U.S., but probably the full nation if we work this thing correctly.
Sure. Well, and again, partnering with the Navajo Nation is a no-brainer, it seems. And as we've talked about, this would be a regional advantage, I think, for other places in the greater Four Corners area.
Yes, and again, that's where this partnership, this effort to bring the two parties together is an opportunity for both sides to voice what they are looking for, what are their goals, what do they want to achieve, and really identify that common ground so that we can all work together in one direction and not be competing with one another, but looking at ways on how this partnership could enhance the viability of bringing this new alternative to the Four Corners region. Because as we spoke before, if we can get this thing started, that opens the door for a number of other things that could be happening here in the county in partnership with the Navajo Nation. That could also open up partnerships with Southwest Colorado as well as Southeast Utah on how we can begin to continue to move forward and help those economies, and we all benefit from their participation and their success.
Exactly, that's true. So to wrap up our conversation about the railroad, Arvin Trujillo, I know the state legislature, there's a bill, I think, to help fund another study about a rail project and whether it would be beneficial and some of those other things that are needed as some of these preliminary steps, and that is been introduced at the legislature. We don't know if it's going to pass or not, but they're talking about it. Yes,
they're talking about it. And again, the idea here is there's going to have to be planning, there's going to have to be mutual, just conceptually some type of team process that we work with the Navajo Nation on. How do we begin to build this? How do we put this together? How do we manage this? And again, those are some of the logistics of the aspects, but we are going to need resources to get that done. And so again, this is a push to begin to identify those areas. Again, that's why this MOU is something that really is a good milestone that we've hit. Because we've really never had this type of documentation in place to really look at something like this.
Right.
And so we're really looking forward to working with the nation on this effort.
And I assume that would send a good message to the state legislature that here you have San Juan County and the Navajo Nation pledging to work together with this project as they consider this money for this study.
Yes, and really from my own experience working with the Navajo Nation in the past, having tribal and non-tribal partnerships not only would be very favorable to the states as they begin to look at, is this worth funding, but also on a federal basis, there could be some tremendous opportunities with this. So again, we're moving at this in steps, and we're in some cases we're utilizing what is there and what we have experienced on. In some cases, we're moving into new ground that really hasn't been done before, and so again, we're being prudent on how we move through this process. But again, we see some real opportunities, and quite frankly, we're quite excited about what we're seeing beginning to develop at this point.
Well, that's exciting news. Thank you for sharing that with us. And the other thing I want to ask you a little bit about is another topic that I know you're excited about, and that is, you talked about it here before, broadband and internet connectivity and getting higher speeds and more capability into the communities in our region. And so that is an important conversation as well, right?
Yes. And again, we kind of we've kind of put that on hiatus for the time being as we were working on getting this MOU and getting this structure put together.
Right.
Now that we're meeting those milestones, we've have brought broadband back into the forefront. We've got the start of the development of a team looking at the different municipalities here in the county itself, but also the nation. We're looking at their cyber team. We're looking at the different chapters. They have different grazing districts. There are 4 of them here in San Juan County. We're looking to get representation from them to bring that together to really begin to figure out how do we put a middle mile plan together? How do we start looking at this, and how do we begin to develop this process? Because there are different discussions ongoing now, especially at the federal level, even the state level, looking at providing funding for rural broadband development. And so the faster we can now begin to look at planning and get plans in place on how we could address this, identifying costs and resources needed, even identifying types of policy and legislation that would enhance rural development, we have a better opportunity to go after this type of money. But more importantly, if we can go at it as a full group, a Four Corners region, rather than different individual cities or different individual counties or even different individual states going after that within San Juan, within the Four Corners area, we all come collectively together and say this would benefit this region here. I think that really adds to our strength to really bring that message forward, not only with the four states, but also at the federal level.
Sure. Well, and remind us again the term middle mile, because when we're talking about internet, I know some people just don't quite understand it. As long as, my stuff works when I want it to, and I can surf the internet and check my Facebook, I'm happy. But this is a little different scenario, right?
Yeah,
about
middle
getting
mile,
this faster speeds to each and every home or business is probably the bigger part of this.
Right. Middle mile basically is, you could imagine it like a big trunk line, a fiber optic trunk line that would be situated in critical areas, so that from that trunk line you can then off-take from that and then go into businesses or homes.
Right. So we know that we have a major line between, say, Farmington, like Durango, Farmington, Albuquerque. There's a major line, right? And this is what you're talking about. And so then how do you get the links, I guess, the connections from that trunk line into the other neighborhoods, the other communities, and then eventually to my house, hopefully, right?
Exactly.
In a fast speed.
Right. And so the middle mile would be that large trunk line that's coming in and is in place. What they call last mile is taken, whether it's wire or microwave, or there are a number of technologies now that you can pull off of these trunk lines to get that distributed out to the different neighborhoods, communities, down to the household, so that everybody has access to broadband. And the better you can position these trunk lines, these middle mile areas, then you can probably also build into that economy of costs, so that you're not looking at, you find ways to bring down the cost of this, basically it's a utility now.
Right. Sure.
You can bring that down to where it's much more affordable, but you have higher speeds, you have more reliability, you have redundancy built in, meaning you have different pathways that they can come. So if the line is cut somewhere, you still have another pathway. So you at home, you don't lose that connectivity. Whereas now we don't have that redundancy. So if the line's cut, everything goes off.
Right. And I can't check my Facebook.
Right.
And it's terrible. But it's not just for that. If I'm working from home or if I'm a business and it goes down and there's no redundancy, that costs money. And that is the bigger issue than just the flippant Facebook comment that I made. But that's what you're talking about. And I think as you do some of these surveys and find out from some of these communities that there are maybe some of the cities or school districts that maybe already have linked some of their facilities with fiber or with some of these other things that could be part of this other middle mile network? Is that, if they're willing to do it, I suppose?
Yes, and that's what we're going to be looking at, because that then cuts down on the cost that would be needed in order to put this plan in place and implement it. So that way we can learn, well, we've already have fiber in this area. All we need to do now is connect that.
Right.
What other areas are needed? And so the idea here would be to get the cost all in place, so we would say, here's where we would like to have these major trunk lines in San Juan County to be. This is how much it's going to cost in order to get that all in. And there's also possibly some legislation or maybe even policies that would enhance the ability to get these lines in place and utilize them for the benefit of rural America. And so again, this is what we're looking at. And once we have those plans in place, being able to present them to Congress and tell them collectively, again, as a Four Corners region, this is what we see. This is how we need the assistance of the federal government in order to put these things in place. and here's how we would like to work with the government to do this. And again, it's really pushing this effort so that we're not just limited to having internet capabilities only where cable is.
Right.
Which is the way most of this Four Corners region is. If you have Comcast or Xfinity or one of these cable services, best bet is you have the capabilities to have internet. But I was in that position where it was somewhat frustrating because we had Comcast in the neighborhood I was living at, but only up to 2 homes away from where I lived. So I had no access to the internet or high-speed broadband. So I had to go to a satellite system until finally Comcast built out and finally included our area, so I had access to that.
Right.
But I know there are other neighborhoods within San Juan County who are in that same position, and then you look at the Navajo Nation with the chapters and et cetera. I mean, you know this, Scott. I mean, President Pendergrass has provided hotspot technology.
That's true. Our library
students.
in Salmon College has provided some of these things, right, for folks who live without high-speed internet or access to it using cell phone towers.
Exactly.
And so I like to remind folks that, we love our cell phones and those cell phone towers, but those towers, guess what? They're connected probably by fiber or something in the ground that gets your data to your phone.
Exactly.
And so this would upgrade all of that or help to do that,
right.
I would assume. So, Arvin, we are out of time, as always happens, but we could be here all morning. But you're going to come back next month.
Yes, I am.
I hope you will, because it's our commitment to economic development and foresight of bringing you in every month. So we appreciate you being here.
Well, I appreciate being here and glad to speak with you. And please, if there's people that have questions, just get in contact with Four Corners Economic Development.
There you go. Very good. Arvin Trujillo, thanks for being here.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Thank you, and I'll be back with more, everyone, in just a moment. We're going to talk prep sports coming up on KSJE. KSJE is supported by the University of Denver Graduate School of Social Work Four Corners program. They're proud to offer a Master's of Social Work degree in the Four Corners community. Applications for the 2020-2022 cohort is now open. Classes are taught Fridays and Saturdays in Durango, Colorado. Find out more at 970-247-9773 or at du.edu/socialwork/